John McMullen on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as the two coordinators speak today. You know, John, the much maligned Jim Schwartz, who had a big hand, I guess, was asked right off the bat, what changed in the second half on Sunday? And he waxed poetic for a while there. What was his explanation as to why the team in the second half defensively seemed to settle in?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us are a little surprised, and I think Jim's in that category as well. I mean, when you give up 346 yards in the first half, which is the worst half anyone can remember from a yardage standpoint, certainly the worst of his career, and then followed up with maybe the best of his career. They did simplify things coverage-wise. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Also had to do with the other team. The coach got very conservative, the quarterback. So all of that entered into it, going away from Saquon Barkley. But the Eagles played well, and then they got some breaks. I mean, Cre'Von LeBlanc playing outside cornerback against Odell Beckham Jr. Usually OBJ is going to get that call. It's probably a hold. Officials let him play. So all of that came into it. But, hey, as I said before the game, and I'll say it today, if Jim Schwartz wins with Sullivan, LeBlanc, and Ballsby, no criticism coming from me.
Yeah, and again, we have, and this isn't as egregious, John, as what Mike Groh said last week, but we have another example of this day producing quotes that just boggled my mind. And I don't want to come totally down on Schwartz by any means, because you're right, they did win that football game despite Pat Shurmur and everybody else in the Giants handing it to them. But the quote, and I'm paraphrasing it, says that Schwartz said he doesn't think he's ever been part of a game with two halves that different. And I thought to myself, well, if you remove Sunday's game, not one but twice this season has Jim Schwartz seen a total collapse by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's had a front row ticket. So, again, I wasn't there. I don't know what the context specifically was, but I saw that tweeted out, and I'm thinking, why? Why even say that?
Well, I think if you listen to the whole press conference, yeah, I think if you put it in the context, he's talking about think about it, 346 yards in the first half. I mean, let me do the math. That's 692. Is that right? In the entire game? I mean, that's just, even in the 2018 NFL, you don't see numbers like that. And then it turned 180, and they gave up nothing in the second half. It was almost ludicrous the way the Giants couldn't move the football. And you're right, part of it has to do with Shurmur and Eli Manning as well. But that's what he meant. I mean, every NFL team this season, and you look at those top defenses, they've all collapsed at times. That's what the 2018 NFL is. I talk about it all the time. Even the best defenses, they get punched in the mouth occasionally because the league has legislated, in many ways, defensive football out of the game. So it's tough to play defense in this league, especially against good offense.
Yeah, John, the defense, which has been, it's had its ups and downs. It had the two losses, Tennessee and Carolina, that everybody kind of points at. But, if they are able to get some of these guys back, do we have enough confidence that this group has we keep asking about the offense turning the corner. And the defense, in my opinion, hasn't been awful, save for a quarter here, a quarter there. I think they've been all right. But did they find something Sunday to suggest that they might get back to that defense that we saw last year, a very attacking, turning the ball over? Did they find something with Jenkins? Did they find something in the pass rush?
No, I'll tell you the most disappointing part of the press conference to me, and I brought this up to Jim, was last year when Jordan Hicks went down. I think one of the silver linings of that is the way they moved Malcolm Jenkins all over the field. They did it again against the Giants out of necessity. And I got the feeling that that's not going to continue. And I think that's when the Eagles are at their best defensively, when they have that moving piece and the opposing offense doesn't necessarily know where Malcolm's going to be on a particular play. against the Giants. He obviously played his normal safety position. He was also a nickel linebacker at times. And then he had to play slot corner when Chandon Sullivan went down. So he was all over the field, and that had sort of a sniff of the Super Bowl season, because that's what went on in the second half of the season. But you get the feeling that Jim doesn't want that moving part. And when Jalen Mills does come back, and Avonte Maddox is able to come back, and Rasul Douglas as well, who played, I think, 2 snaps, but really wouldn't have even been dressed if they didn't have so many injury problems. When all those guys are back, I think we're going to go back to the normal defense, and it's going to be better than certainly it was. I don't think there's a lot of teams the Eagles would have beaten on Sunday, to be honest. I think most teams would have been able to beat them pretty easily. So from that standpoint, I don't think there was any turning of the corner. I think there's a continue, and Jim mentioned this today, to wait for those guys. They're coming back. Hopefully some of them can be back on Monday night, and they need them back.
I just don't want Cre'Von LeBlanc to ever be replaced. He needs to be an Eagle for life.
Well, he actually played pretty well. He did. He was the one corner, and he started out in the slot, and then he had to move outside once Chandon Sullivan got hurt. So that was an issue for him, a curveball. Remember, he's the one who hasn't been around. At least Sullivan and Ballsby were here in the offseason and in training camp. They picked him up off waivers from Detroit. But he's played before. He's played in this league. He's played 32 games in this league. So at least the stage wasn't too big for him. And I thought he battled. And I thought he was competent, at least.
Yeah, John, and looking at not only the game against the Giants, but also moving forward, I think it's been the same conversation a lot of us have had about offense versus defense. And as you lay out guys who we expect to return and come back healthy, or at least healthier, that first half, I mean, this offense is atrocious. And I have zero confidence in this offense at all in a big game moving forward. And that wasn't a big game. Come on. I'm not saying you thought it was. I'm just saying in general, this team instills zero confidence for me on offense.
Yeah, it's tough to play a big game against a bad opponent. The only way you can consider that a big game is because if the Eagles lose it, they're probably out of it for all intents and purposes. So that's the only way you can spin it as anything more. But I do think if one unit may, and I'm not going to say they turned the corner, but at least they did what they hadn't been able to do. It was the offense late in the game, and the game-winning drive, and being able to move the football. And I wrote about that, and everyone's talking about the running game. I talked about it with Mike yesterday. It's not the running game; it's balance, and that's what, to his credit, Doug Peterson has talked about all year. If you don't convert on third down, well, the running game's not going to look good, because you're going to be off the field pretty quickly. And that drive was a perfect example of it. They had 9 offensive plays, 6 were runs, all of them, every single one ineffective. But they were able to move the chains with the pass. First, it was the 21-yard gain to Alshon Jeffrey. Then they lost a yard. They were behind the sticks and running the football. They got most of it back with Zach Ertz. And then on 3rd and 1, they got stoned running the football. And I had to go on 4th and 1. And again, it was the pass. It was the mesh concept. And the Giants blowing the coverage, and Nelson Aguilar converting. And then they're able to kick the game-winning field goal. But what the running game did do in that situation was siphon the clock. So they were able to convert with the passing game and siphon the clock with the running game, and all of a sudden you win. You leave a quarterback like Eli Manning with 22 seconds. He's not going to be able to do anything with it. So it was perfect. The way the end of that game was executed was perfect. So I'm not going to say it's turning the corner, but it was certainly a positive step.
John, when you say it's not the running game, it's balance, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that? Well, they don't have to run the ball, they just need balance. I mean, if you have a balanced attack, that means you're running the ball. At least that's how I look at it. So I just want your thoughts on what you mean when you say, well, it wasn't essentially running the ball, it was just balanced.
Generally, when people talk about running the ball, they're talking about effectively running the ball. Now, sometimes the run game can bail out the passing game. If you throw it on 1st and 10 and you're not able to get it, and then you run on 2nd and 10 and you're able to get 9 yards and pick up 3rd down on the run again, the running game is bailing out the passing game. But the numbers, whether it ends up in the game, is what I'm talking about, the balance between pass and throwing. Again, in that last drive, the Eagles ran the ball a lot. They ran it, but they didn't run it effectively. And the passing game bailed them out. But what the run did do was take the time off the clock. And that's what we're talking about is balance. And it also, even when it's not effective, it puts it in the opposing defense's mind. And I think Mike mentioned this yesterday, and he's right. So when you throw those RPOs or you go play action, the defense might take a step forward and might bite on it, effective or not. So it's not about just running the football and being effective running the football. It's about moving the chains any way you can, and then the balance creates itself, and that's when you're being successful. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, everybody has been pointing to this number. The Eagles are 5-0 when they run it 25 times. You can't just show up against the Redskins and run it 26 times and expect to win. That's what happens when you do win. That's what I think people don't
It's kind of a
understand.
chicken and an egg thing. It's like when you basically pass to take the 17-point lead, and now you're running to balance out that number because the clock continues to run.
Exactly. And again, it turns out to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's why successful teams are balanced, because they win games, and they're in position to do that.
Now, the interesting thing here, though, John, was the Eagles were down in this game and ran themselves kind of back into it. Now, a lot of it was they ran, and late in that game they took the lead and then were going to set up that last field goal, and they ran like 3-4 times and were using some clock because the bonehead coach of the other team took a timeout on 3rd down and 15 for no reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a tie game because remember the Giants tied it up with the field goal. And then the Eagles went on a 10-play drive, which took up 5.5 minutes essentially, and left 22 seconds on the clock. They had 9 offensive plays before the field goal. That was the 10th. 6 of them were runs. They got 7 yards on those running plays. The other 3, the effectiveness of the drive was Carson Wentz throwing it to Alshon Jeffrey, to Zach Ertz, to Nelson Aguilar. So you're right, though. Earlier in the game, they had a great drive running the football. They used a lot of 13 personnel. I've been talking about this all year. Richard Rodgers is back. You watch the film of that. He's consistently thrown these wham blocks. He's not Mark Bavaro, but he's a veteran guy who knows how to block, so that helped as well, getting him on the field. I'm going to say it for the 3rd time. A lot of it had to do with the opponent, which was a bad football team.
Yeah, I don't know how much this team can really get out of that moving forward. Listen, the division is bad. We know it's bad. But the Cowboys are playing good football. And even though they to Dallas on Thanksgiving, John, you saw it, Jay Gruden didn't dumb anything down or ask Colt McCoy to just hand the football off. They're going to throw the football. And why wouldn't they, knowing how banged up and porous this Eagles secondary is? I almost feel like we need that dosage of, I hate to root against this team, but I almost feel like that dose of reality still needs to sting locally here, because for whatever reason, I don't know, people looked at that game yesterday on Sunday and thought, now there's a chance. And I don't see that.
Well, I don't think that's fair. I think there is a chance, but I think that chance stems from the fact that what you said, it stems from the fact that the division is bad. If it's a good division, if there's even one good team, we're not having this conversation. There isn't. The Eagles are playing the Redskins at home. The Redskins,
and by the way, are a touchdown favorite.
the Redskins don't throw the ball effectively to begin with, even with Alex Smith, and now they don't have Alex Smith.
Well, I could argue they could be better throwing the football with McCoy, right?
You could. They've generally been a run-first team with Adrian Peterson. We talk all the time about how small the margin of victory is if you try to go about it that way. They are much improved on the defensive side of the ball. So I think it's a bigger test for the offense because that front seven's pretty impressive. And Swearinger's having a great year on the back end. They still have Josh Norman, who's been kind of up and down, but can still play at times. So I think the offense has the tougher test. The defense, you're right. I mean, look, anybody can throw on them if LeBlanc and Sullivan and Ballsby are out there. The key for that is Thursday we're going to see is anybody back, whether it's Jalen Mills, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas. The hope is one or two of those guys gets back on the field. The extra day will help a little bit.
John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. We focused a lot on what Schwartz had to say. Mike Groh, I mean, he doesn't, when Reich would speak last year, there was a little bit more going on. I feel like Groh gets zero attention except for when he makes bonehead things to say. Anything compelling.
Well, it's his own fault.
Right. Anything compelling. It seems like a lot of Adams talk with Mike Groh today. And what does Groh specialize in designing the running game? Like, what is his forte?
No, his forte. He's a former quarterback. He's a former passing game coordinator, former with the Rams, former offensive coordinator at the college level of Virginia. No, he's a passing guy, and he's mainly involved with the 2-minute offense. But the passing game as a whole, I always joke. Jim Schwartz opened today for Mike Groh. And I always joke that's like Sinatra opening up for a lounge singer. The Eagles should do it the other way. I mean, Mike just does his press conferences, and he doesn't give you a lot. And it's gotten worse since he started getting a little bit of criticism. And it's understandable. I don't think he's comfortable with the press conferences just yet. But I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't think that's a necessary indication of whether somebody's good or not at their job. I say it all the time. If winning press conferences made you a good coach, Chip Kelly would still be here.
Winner.
It's not. It's nice, but it's not a key to the job.
Hey, John, Adams got a lot of attention, but I thought that was the most burst and best we've seen Clement, too.
Yeah, I think this role they've set up, and now it'll be Josh will be sort of the guy, the bell cow back, so to speak. It's kind of, you can't say that about anybody on this team, but he'll be the guy getting the most touches, and I think Corey fits in as his change of pace guy in the third down back who can catch out of the backfield.
Does that suggest that Sproles is completely done?
Well, Doug says no.
All right.
But
Markelle Fultz will be back before Sproles, John.
Come on.
It's possible.
That's unfair.
Hey, we're getting, it's getting late early, as they say. So we got 5 games left. I don't expect him back this week. And then maybe the 4th week off the second hamstring injury. Maybe he can come back. But it's hard to count on it. I will say that.
Yeah.
If he does come back, if he is able to come back, he will be. I don't think there's any doubt he will be the third down back. He will be the punt returner. But it's hard to expect that. Either way, Josh Adams is going to be the main running back.
John McMullen, follow him at JF McMullen. Get all of his Eagles insight at 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles Redskins this Monday night right here on 97.3. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys.